Good. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 18 had already announced the doom of Babylon. Now I know we're starting in chapter 17, but I'm going back and reading 14:8. And another angel, a second one, followed, saying, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality." The fall of Babylon was a major theme in the book of Revelation. So again in chapter 16 and verse 9, the great city was split into three parts, and the cities of the nations fell. Babylon the Great was remembered before God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. And now as we come to chapter 17, we're going to look at her religious nature in more detail. And in chapter 18, we will look at her commercial nature in greater detail. Chapter 17, verse 1. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters." One of the angels that had the seven bowls. We're not told which one. One out of seven. Doesn't make any difference. What it does do is tie chapter 17 to the bowl judgments. These are the angels of the bowl judgments, and one of those angels comes with the announcement for chapter 17. This is enlarging on the final bowl judgment. It's inserted in this section. It's between other things. It's a parenthesis almost, except it's too important for a parenthesis. It's kind of the main event. It's fitting for one of the bowl angels to bring it. And one of the same angels is going to be the one to bring an announcement in another parallel, the section 21:9 through 22:5. That's another section that is inserted in between events. And that is going to tie the later section, the one in chapter 21:9 through 22:5, to the bowl judgments again, because it's one of the bowl judgment angels. Plenty of angels to go around. Could have used other angels. But he selected one of the bowl judgment angels. He starts with, "Come here, I will show you." He uses exactly the same words. I say he. It may not be the same bowl judgment angel, but the angel who was one of the bowl judgment angels in chapter 21, verse 9, uses exactly the same words. "Come here, I will show you." And that further identifies these two little inserted sections, or maybe big inserted sections. We're talking chapters 17 and 18 here, and a large section later on. And God gives a deliberate contrast in this section, which deals with Babylon's destiny, contrasted to the next section, which deals with the destiny of the bride of Christ. So one of the bowl judgment angels introduces a section about Babylon. Here's what's going to happen to Babylon. This is where they're finishing up. And then one of them comes later on and said, now here's what's happening to the bride of Christ. This is different. Long live the contrast. This is good. The harlot. The word porne is used in some form in this chapter 7 times. You won't be able to pick that out by your English translation, but some form of this word is used 7 times. We've had this before, haven't we? 7 times mega was in a chapter before. And that number 7 is quite often found in the book of Revelation. And so it certainly points out that this chapter is about porne. And you understand porne even though you don't read Greek, right? Porne comes out in your mind with the word pornography. Sure. And that's the wickedness that is being used here. The word porne comes from a word meaning to sell. Well, that fits, doesn't it? Tyre was called a harlot. Isaiah chapter 23, 15 through 17. Now in that day Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years like the days of one king. At the end of the 70 years it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the harlot. Take your harp, walk about the city, and, O forgotten harlot, pluck the strings skillfully, sing many songs that you may be remembered. It will come about at the end of the 70 years that the Lord will visit Tyre. Then she will go back to her harlot's wages and will pay the harlot with all the kingdoms on the face, play the harlot with all the kingdoms on the face of the earth. So Tyre is referred to as a harlot, but Tyre is not the only one. Jerusalem is referred to as a harlot also. How the faithful city has become a harlot. She who was full of justice, righteousness once lodged in her, but now murderers. Another city was called a harlot, the city of Nineveh. Nahum 3, 4, and 5. All because of the many harlotries of the harlot, the charming one, the mistress of sorceries, who sells nations by her harlotries and families by her sorceries. Behold, I am against you, declares the Lord of hosts. You didn't see the name of Nineveh there. You can go back in that portion and read in the context and find Nineveh there. A metaphysical harlot practices false religion. The idea of the harlot here is selling a false religious idea, false religion. It could be apostasy. If it were apostasy, it would mean that a person initially followed the truth of God and then departed into false religion. It's not called apostasy here. Could be just promoting and worshiping a false god. So there are harlotries going on all over our country, aren't there? You just think about all the groups that are promoting false gods, false ideas of God. And God's term for those groups is harlot. That's what they are. ISIS is doing that right now. Big example. And that is spreading through many nations. Who knows where that'll end up? What ISIS is doing in Iraq now fits very neatly with what God says is going to be done in Babylon. And that's what he's talking about here in the book of Revelation in chapter 18. That's something to think about. How long did it take for ISIS to become a power on the scene?
Very short time.
Just very short time. That's one of the things that's troubled me in the past about this identification of Babylon. I might as well give it away already. It's the real city. We're talking here about the city of Babylon on the Euphrates River. And you think, well, these things just don't fit. They're practically nothing. They're insignificant. But it won't take any time at all for them to become very significant, I'm thinking. All false religion of all time is represented in the harlotries here. And as we go through this passage, we're going to find this harlot sitting on a beast. And the beast has 7 heads, I think. He's got 7 of one and 10 of the other, and we'll get there and I'll have it in my notes and I'll remember it then. Did you find it?
7 heads and 10 horns.
Okay, 7 heads and 10 horns. The 7 heads go all the way back before Assyria and Babylon and Medo-Persia and Greece and Rome, and come all the way through to she's sitting on a beast that represents government through all the centuries. And this beast is represented in the harlotries of the woman. It is religion, false religion, riding on the government, the beast, controlling the government even. But that's not in my notes. I give you that for free. Exodus chapter 34 and 15 helps us to get the idea of a metaphorical harlot. And I've used that word twice now, metaphorical, and I almost always have to review it in my mind. What are we talking about? If it's a simile, I say something is like something. That's a simile. They are similar. If I say something is something, but I mean it in a symbolic sense, then it's a metaphor. So metaphorically, harlotry can be defined here, 34:15. Otherwise, you might make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. In other words, don't make any covenants with the inhabitants of the land when you're going in Israel. Otherwise, you might make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they would play the harlot with their gods and sacrifice to their gods, and someone might invite you to eat of his sacrifice. Don't connect, Israel, as you're going into the land of Canaan. Don't tie up, don't make covenants with the people in the land, because there's a hazard that those people will play the harlot. How would they play the harlot? They'd invite you to sacrifice to their gods and invite you to eat of his sacrifice. It's this practice of false religion that's being introduced, and God calls it harlotry. Back to our harlot in chapter 17. She is a symbol. As a symbol, this harlot represents a literal city, the city of Babylon. She promotes worship of false gods. And that promotion of the worship of false gods goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 11 and some tower builders right after the flood. The city, of course, is Babel back then. And it builds to a peak in the reign of the beast here in the book of Revelation. It goes all the way through. It is the same nature all the way through. The kings of the earth have worshipped these false gods with the harlot. She sits on many waters, and she sits on the beast. She's seen two ways: sitting on many waters, sitting on the beast. John saw her in two different positions. And so, sitting on, she's in control. If you are riding a horse, you better hope you're in control. Sitting on the beast, she's seen as being in control of the beast. The other control is the water. She sits on the waters. The beast, she controls temporarily, because we're going to see as we go along here that the beast turns and eats her up. And that's the end of her. So it's a temporary thing. Verse 15 identifies the waters. The waters are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. She sits upon many waters. The upon or on is a Greek preposition, epi, E-P-I, and it can mean upon the shore of. And that's what it means here. She sits upon the shore of many waters. Babylon, appropriately enough, is situated on many waters. The water of the Euphrates, the water of many canals, the water of many irrigation ditches, and the water of many marshes, all over Babylon, in spite of the fact that Babylon is in a wilderness. Babylon mentioned in Jeremiah 51:13, O you who dwell by many waters, abundant in treasures, your end has come, the measure of your end. Again, you have to go back to Jeremiah 51, pick up the context, and you'll see that it's talking about Babylon there. So that ties in very clearly that Babylon sits on many waters, and therefore ties Babylon to the prophecy of the harlot in our passage. Immorality with kings and all levels of society on the earth. Verse 2. Revelation 17:2, with whom the kings of the earth committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunk with the wine of her immorality. So you've got the kings of the earth committing immorality, and you've got those who dwell on the earth made drunk with the wine of her immorality. It's the kings and it's the people. Quite often the people follow the direction of the leadership. That's not surprising, is it? And so the leadership is going this direction, and the people are going that direction. It's amazing to me how quickly the population of the United States has shifted in their thinking about basic things. And it's been the leaders who started it out. They're the leaders in this immorality. They're the harlots. Oh, am I getting too direct now? That's what this is saying. Been going on all through the millenniums. And so the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality, and those who dwell on the earth. But the phrase is repeated. You notice what I've underlined there? Committed acts of immorality. We're going down to chapter 18 and verse 3. And there we read, the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her. And we go down to, we go back to verse 9, which is already on the screen. And the kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality and lived sensuously with her. This harlotry is the acts of immorality with the kings of the earth. What's immoral? Worship of false gods is immoral. This is the harlotry that is Babylon and is going on with the kings of the earth. Religious harlotry is the core of chapter 17. Economic harlotry is the core of chapter 18. It's all harlotry. It's all tied to false gods and false religion. And that's the subject of these two chapters. Babylon gains this position among the nations by cooperation with the beast. The harlot, representing Babylon, is astride the beast. They are operating together. This may develop rapidly after the tribulation begins. The religious compromise necessary to this cooperation is not compatible with worshiping the one true God. If you're going to worship the one true God, you can't go along with the harlotry of the woman and the beast. You have to make a choice. They won't go together. And because you can't worship God and the beast at the same time, it's harlotry. You're being unfaithful to the only one who deserves your faithfulness, God. The kings of the earth, they link with the Babylonian system. They sacrifice any religious principles that they may have had, and it is the way of the nations. It was the way of Assyria to substitute her leadership for the gods of other peoples, and in this case for the only one and only God. Was the way of Babylon, and it was the way of Rome. They exalted their leaders as being gods. It was harlotry. It's what it's talking about here. And the apostate church eagerly seeks such a relationship with political power. And that's what we're looking at in the current age. The apostate church. You watch the ones that bow down to the idol. As these things go along, you're going to see where the harlotry is. The people of the earth. Those who dwell on the earth. We have that phrase used technically several times in the book of Revelation. And when it's used technically, the people who dwell on the earth are all those who are worshiping the beast, taking the mark of the beast, who are never going to be saved. They're the reprobates all through the book. This is the same phrase in English, but it's just a little different in Greek. I think it means the same thing, but I point out to you that there is this one little flaw in that idea. Don't have another idea for it, but it doesn't have the E-P-I, epsilon, pi, iota that I mentioned before. It's in all the phrases all the way through, making an exact phrase. But in this one, even though it's translated the same way, it's not exactly the same in the original text. Speaks of being made drunk with the wine of her immorality. Political and religious powers seduce the people. They introduce abortion. They redefine marriage. They take totally different directions from the truth of God, as if there were not a God, as if he didn't have the right to say what is and what is not, to define the 10 commandments and the rest of the commandments. And these people are going along. They are made drunk with the wine of her immorality. Their allegiance to the beast is so strong that it intoxicates them. If you're intoxicated, you're not thinking straight. Your inhibitions have been lowered. And they're intoxicated so that they don't think straight about God and morality. They're intoxicated with the false religion of the beast and the woman. In verse 3 of Revelation 17, and he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, full of blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So the angel moves John. He carried me away in the Spirit. Now, Spirit is capitalized there. It's capitalized in the English translation. It is not capitalized in the Greek text, because the Greek text either is all capitals or no capitals. It doesn't put the capital at the beginning of a proper name or something like that. So your capital S for Spirit here says the translators think that was a reference to the Holy Spirit. Carried away in the Holy Spirit. Seems more reasonable to me to believe that he was carried away in the Spirit, meaning he wasn't bodily carried to a different location, but in a vision he was carried to another location. He carried me away in the Spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. John finds himself in spirit at a location 4 times in the book of Revelation. In chapter 1 and verse 10, he was in the Spirit on the Lord's day on earth. In chapter 4 and verse 1, he was carried in spirit up into heaven. Right here, we have him taken into a wilderness in spirit. And in chapter 21 and verse 10, he will be taken in spirit to a mountain. So those are the 4 locations that are identified in the book of Revelation as his having been taken there in spirit. Into a wilderness. Into a wilderness is where he was taken, where he found this. In Isaiah 21, it spoke of a wilderness place. The oracle concerning the wilderness of the sea. As windstorms in the Negev sweep on, it comes from the wilderness, from a terrifying land. And I'm skipping down to verse 9, Isaiah 21:9. Now behold, here comes a troop of riders, horsemen in pairs. And one said, fallen, fallen is Babylon, and all the images of her gods are shattered on the ground. So Babylon was identified by Isaiah as being a place in the wilderness. And we have the woman seen in the wilderness. The woman whom we're saying represents Babylon. And Babylon was a wilderness place in Isaiah, and it's a wilderness place here in the book of Revelation. Wilderness may be the region surrounding, or it may be an indication of the desolation to which Babylon is coming. One or the other. The beast has 7 heads and 10 horns, and we've seen this beast before, haven't we? Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. And the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea having, well, imagine that, 10 horns and 7 heads. And on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. Do you remember what was in chapter 13? In chapter 12 we had the dragon. Chapter 13 we had the beast out of the sea and the beast out of the land. This beast is the beast out of the sea, which comes first. And that beast out of the sea, which was one of the unholy trinity, the representation falsely of Jesus Christ, is back again here in chapter 17. The 7 heads are 7 governments. They are mountains, they are kings, and they follow after one another. Maybe I ought to back up one. No, maybe I ought to back up. Boy, I'm going to have to go forward a long ways, huh? He carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, having blasphemous names, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And these heads are representation, as we go through the chapter, of mountains, of kings. They follow after one another, and there are blasphemous names on the 7 heads, showing that it's been this way all through the centuries. Now, we'll come back to this as we're going further through. The 10 horns are kings who haven't received a kingdom yet. I'm a little bit ahead of myself, but we've seen the heads and the horns here, and I'm just talking about them a little bit before we really get to where they are explained. They haven't received a kingdom yet. That means at the time that John is writing in the 1st century, towards the end of the century, these kings haven't received a kingdom yet. They're going to receive a kingdom. When are they going to receive a kingdom? At this future date during the tribulation, which is the subject of the entire book, well, not the entire book, but chapters 4 and following of the book of Revelation. Harlot's clothing. The woman was clothed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a gold cup full of abominations of the unclean things of her immorality. The way she's clothed looks like the formal clothing of some of the more formal religions, doesn't it? Adorned with gold. The gold is really a major thing here. there are two words put together for the adorned with gold. The first word means adorned with gold. The second word means gold. So you've got adorned with gold, gold. What's that telling us? The gold is the big feature here. They're in it for the money. The gold jewelry speaks of her wealth. And so this harlot is really mostly interested in the finer things here and now. Want to have the wealth for right now. Want to have the gold, want to have the jewelry, want to have the fine clothing, all of that. That's her major goal. And how does she get it? She rides the beast. By riding the beast, she gets the wealth that she wants. Her cup adds to her splendor. She's not ashamed of her cup. The abominable false gods are her glory. And what God hates, her cup is full of. Her adornment is like the great city. 18:16 saying, "Woe, woe, the great city, she who was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and purple." The woman's adornment is like the adornment of the city in the next chapter. Ties them together. And then we come to the name on her forehead in chapter 17 and verse 5. And on her forehead a name was written, a mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. Now, we have the word mystery here, and it's not in the same typeface as Babylon. And we have a quotation mark there, and a quotation mark there. And none of these distinctions is found in the Greek text. That does not mean that they're not correct. It just means that this is not telling you that the Greek text has the word mystery different than the word Babylon. The Greek text has both words the same. And so it's a matter of interpretation of the text, whether this reads one way or the other way. So is it mystery Babylon the Great, or is it a mystery Babylon the Great? Big difference in what it means depending upon which way we do it. You could do it either way, looking at the Greek text here. If it is mystery Babylon the Great, then it's a different meaning from a mystery, quote, Babylon the Great. If it's a mystery, Babylon the Great, then it's telling us that this name, Babylon the Great, is a mystery name. And if it's a mystery name, then Babylon can mean any of a number of things. Babylon could mean Rome. Babylon could mean Jerusalem. Babylon could mean New York, if it is that way. But if it is mystery Babylon, then it's telling us that we have a mystery in Babylon that had been hidden in ages past, but now has been revealed, and we can see the real character of Babylon, which we could not see before. It was a mystery, now unveiled. So what do we have in support of it being a mystery, Babylon the Great? In other words, giving it a spiritual meaning, saying the word Babylon doesn't really mean Babylon, it can mean whatever because it's a mystery. Can we support that? Well, the word spiritually is used in chapter 11 and verse 8 in exactly that way. spiritually it's such and such. In other words, it's not literal, it's a metaphor. But in chapter 11 and verse 8, the spiritually is translated from the word for a mystery. Spiritually in 11:8, translated mystically in our text, but it's a different word. And it's also an adverb, whereas this in our text in chapter 17 is a noun. Boy, going back into the English probably is really fouling things up. What does it mean if it's an adverb? If it's an adverb, it's describing the verb. Mystically Babylon. And you have to kind of put a verb in there somewhere to fill that out, because the verb really isn't there. And in 120, we have the mystery of the seven stars, and it uses a mystery as a description. And in chapter 1, in verse 20, the stars represent the churches. So it's mystical, it's represent. So all of these things argue for this is a symbol, the second of these two things. Those are arguments in support of that. An additional argument is a specific application of the proposed symbolism. Someone says the symbolism is Rome. This is a code name for Rome. When it says Babylon, what it really means is Rome. And so there's some arguments for that. Babylon is used to mean Rome. Rome has 7 hills. And Rome is a great city, and Rome certainly reigns over the kings of the earth. So those are arguments to support the idea. Not only is it a mystery, symbolical, but the symbol is a symbol of Rome. But we have some arguments that say it's not a code name for Rome. It is a code name for Rome in the 2nd century, but John is writing in the 1st century, and the meaning of the term may not have been the same in the 1st century as it was in the 2nd century. Can I give you a contemporary example? How about the word gay? The word gay did not mean the same thing in the last century as it does in this century. Now, it's not exactly on the century mark, I'll give you that. But you can understand that you can't take the current meaning of the word gay to say what the word meant 50 years ago. And by the same token, you can't take the fact that Rome was used for Babylon in the 2nd century to say that it means that in this place at this earlier time. The 7 hills fit Rome. Rome has 7 hills. Sometimes you could say 8 or 9, but Rome does have 7 hills. But as we go through Revelation, the hills are kingdoms, not literal hills. So the fact that Rome has 7 literal hills does not tie it to our Babylon of 7 hills here. The hills are different between the two. Calling it the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth fits Rome. And we'll have to give you that, but it's only one of the arguments. And it may not control where we're going. It does reign over the kings of the earth. There are reasons why Rome does not fit. Later uses a code name does not count. 7 hills are symbols, not literal hills. Rome does not sit on many waters. But Babylon does sit on many waters. We saw that already. And Rome is not in a wilderness. And Babylon is in a wilderness. So while you might be able to tie Rome to the description because of reigning over kings, you cannot with reference to these 2 very important features of Babylon in our text. Now, support for literal Babylon. The noun is normally used this way. Now we talked about the difference between noun and adverb. If it was an adverb, it could be the symbolism. But a noun is normally used to speak of mystery Babylon, meaning the mystery is something you're learning about Babylon that you did not know before. You're not saying that it's not really Babylon, that it's a symbol for something else. That's the way the noun would normally be used. And an adjective would normally be used for the other way of understanding it. The mystery is something not known before, but seen now. And you'll see that in a number of places in the Scripture. It is used that way with reference to salvation and all the Gentiles in the church in another place. But what was not known about Babylon before is the degree of Babylon's evil. This is really spelling out the evil. I don't think that people of the world have an idea yet about Babylon's evil being revealed here in this passage. Babylon is a saint killer. Doesn't have that reputation now, does it? But this is revealing that Babylon is a saint killer. And Babylon has a relationship with the beast, and that was not known. This beast, this Antichrist, is related to Babylon. So we're going to take Babylon as being literal. This is mystery Babylon, not symbolic Babylon, but a mystery revealing the real character of Babylon as we go through. Spiritually, Babylon then is the mother of harlots and abominations. The mother of harlots and abominations. A fountainhead of false religion, of error concerning who God is. Mother is the source. False religion started in Genesis chapter 11 at Babel. What were they doing at Babel?
Tower.
Building a tower to reach
Heaven.
up into heaven. And those towers were built for worshiping false gods, not the real God. It has plagued the world with false religion. It will increase its abominable influence as the end draws near, and attempts by nations to rescue a rock from the grip of evil are not going to get the job done. We know the future. And people who read the Scriptures correctly could figure that out. So you may know more than some of the people who form public policy. How about that? Yeah, we know where this thing's going to end up. Not obvious just looking at it, is it? Looks very poor and weak and insignificant, but it's had a long history, and it's coming up. And Babylon kills saints. We saw that she inspires others to do it. Here we see that she is eager to do it. In Revelation chapter 17 and verse 6, and I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. The saints and the witnesses, are they different? No, they're the same thing. The saints are the ones who bear witness. The blood of is repeated twice to emphasize that she is spilling blood of the saints. As saints, they are pure. As witnesses, they are bearing witness to the truth of God. And Babylon is spilling their blood. ISIS seems to like to do that, don't they? And here we had a prophecy. Now, ISIS is not quite Babylon. I'm just bringing that up because it's operating within the regions of both Syria and Iraq. We're in the territory. Suppose ISIS took over there. Is that unthinkable? It's not unthinkable at all. And if ISIS takes over, and has the nation and all the oil wealth. Am I saying this is what's predicted in Scripture? No, I'm not. I'm just saying it's something which could happen, and it's one way that this thing could go very quickly. Babylon is judged for what she promotes and for what she opposes. Murdering saints will reach a new level with Babylon. And John is amazed. It's an emphatic statement when it says that John is amazed. I wondered greatly. I wondered, that's one, okay, John wondered. That's a flat statement, right? I wondered with a marvel. I marveled with a marvel, or I wondered with a wonder, is what it says. And that's reinforcing it. That makes it stronger. And then there's one other way it's made stronger, a great wonder. I wondered with a wonder greatly. So John is just, wow, what's this? And what makes him marvel so much? What stands out? It's not stated. Something's causing him to wonder. Is it the unrestrained wickedness of the woman? Wow, look at how wicked she is. Never imagined that. Or is he wondering at the fact that God permits it? Would God let that go on? Maybe he could be wondering at that. Maybe he's wondering at seeing the woman dressed in splendor instead of Babylon in ruins. After all this, I thought she'd really be a wreck. And look at her, she's all decked out. She looks pretty good to me. I mean, not good, but prospering good. But another possible explanation of his wonder is trying to come to grips with what it means. What is this? What's it saying? And verse 7 continues. And the angel said to me, why do you wonder? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has 7 heads and 10 horns. The angel says he will explain what this means. And that suggests to us that the wonder of John is the wonder of what does this all mean? That's probably the correct explanation. And then we go into verse 8 and following. But I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm basically done here. Father, thank you. Thank you for telling us about these things in the future. And thank you for giving us men who have studied this very capably and can help us to see and understand these things. And pray, Father, that you'll help us to make the application to our own lives. As we see the day approaching, we're going to recognize it better by knowing the book of Revelation. Thank you for your promised blessing, and we're counting on you to deliver it to us as we study these things and understand them. Pray, Father, that you'll go with us this week and help us to be strong and bold for you. We pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.